Have you ever walked out of a horror movie and just felt more annoyed than afraid? Take A Quiet Place Day 1 for an example. I loved the first movie in this series when it first came out. This series had such a strong start, but this one just lacked the tension that made the first so damn scary. And I can list off a couple horror movies that came out recently that fall into this criteria. And what's even more frustrating is that all these movies get gassed up so much on social media that they can just never live up to the hype once you go see them in theaters. But what if I told you that there's horror films out there that you haven't even heard about that are so scary it makes it hard to go to bed at night? Well, today I'm ranking 3 of these movies that I've watched and I have been terrified by. And trust me, I've watched thousands of horror movies. I do not scare easy. Obviously, there's going to be minor spoilers for these movies, but I'm not going to give away the whole thing. And don't forget to like and subscribe, or else I'm going to show up in your nightmares. Just kidding. Maybe not, though. Let's dive in with Splinter.
Don't move.
Okay.
Stay there.
Okay.
Put your hands on your head.
Look, you're not listening. There's something out there.
This film grabbed me in just from the beginning with just how cool the creature design was. And on top of that, the tension on this film is phenomenal. I think a lot of recent monster movies that we've seen come out have always struggled to really have cool creatures. I have a feeling they all just kind of look the same these days. Well, not in Splinter, because this film's creature is beyond anything I think I've ever seen in a horror movie before. Basically, it's a parasite, but it grows through wooden splinters. It makes no sense, but at the same time, it is so damn cool. You cannot touch the thing because anything it touches becomes part of it. And it keeps growing and growing over the course of the movie. And by the end, we see a really cool looking creature. I think the reason why most horror movies these days suck, it's because the monsters in them are done with VFX instead of practical effects. I don't know why, but for some reason, when you make the monsters practical, like in The Thing or in Splinter, it just looks so much better. And when it's a computer generated image, it doesn't look as good. You'd think that with CGI, monsters could look so much cooler because we can just make whatever we want on the computer. But no, for some reason, practical effects is always what ends up looking better. Like, think back to The Thing. That is one of the best body horror creature movies out there. And it's just so disturbingly terrifying. And compare that to its remake where it's all CGI, it just doesn't hit the same. And when practical effects turn out as good as they do in The Thing or Splinter, it just adds another sense of dread because you're so mesmerized with just how badass and how cool a creature can look. And speaking of badass, we gotta talk about the characters in this movie. I think what is so interesting about this movie is that the characters' personalities are so well done, it just adds a level of believability to the film, which aids in creating the tension in the conflict. We see these characters make mistakes in the movie, and they're not cheap mistakes. They are real, genuine, believable mistakes in the film that lead to more action in the film. I think a lot of horror movies these days have very dumb characters that often make very silly mistakes, and you sit there at the screen, you're like, why you do that? Why would you let the killer inside your house? Becky, what the fuck? Becky, what are you doing? Becky, he's right behind you. I think someone's in the closet. No, like, I don't know what it is in Hollywood and just putting a bunch of idiots into horror movies. But it takes away so much of the scariness because in our minds, we say to ourselves, we're not that dumb. That would never happen to me. Whether that's true or not, it gives us a lasting impression of what that film is like. But if you take characters that are smart and real and have their flaws, it makes the monster so much scarier when it outsmarts them. Because if you're in a math competition, nobody's cheering for you if you beat a 4-year-old at 2 + 2. But if you beat the smartest person in your country, yeah, people are going to notice. I think a big part of this as well comes down to acting. When characters are stupid, it makes it even worse if their acting and the delivery on their lines is bad. Not in Splinter. The acting in this film is really good and really believable. When I first watched this movie, I had doubts because you see a really nerdy loser type guy with a really attractive, badass sort of girlfriend, which isn't a common thing. That's kind of something you would see in like a comedy movie or something, or like a superhero film. And it's kind of cheesy, but the film works with it really, really well. You see that While she is this badass girl, she's also incredibly empathetic towards her boyfriend, who kind of gets picked on by the criminal guy that shows up. But then you see these character arcs as the three of them are stuck in the gas station and have to work together. And with that, we see just the background of all their personalities, and it makes for really good world building and tension building. And on top of that, it does something that I think many horror movies try to do, but fail miserably at, and that's having comedy. When it comes to horror movies, I think comedy is a very delicate subject. If it comes out cheesy, you get into the campy area, and then your movie's kind of laughed at altogether. But if you put comedy into a horror movie, but you make it dark, black comedy, I think that's what works best. I think this blends perfectly with the tension and pacing of this film because it allows us to go from here to here to here to here, all within the span of an hour and a half. It's a whole roller coaster of different emotions. And once you get off that roller coaster, you can say, wow, that was scary, that was cool, and it made me laugh. That's like the trilogy of the best things a movie can do. So while this is only the first movie I'm mentioning on this list, I think it's generally really scary and really cool, but not as scary as the next movie we're about to talk about. And that's the lost footage of Leah Sullivan.
Hello?
God, you scared me.
Hey.
I need to come clean with you about something. I am in love with found footage horror. I'm not some artsy film bro or anything, but I think found footage is one of the most unique formats of film out there. And when it's done correctly, it adds so much believability to the scares it tries to build and set in its films. On the other hand, it can fail lots of times. And when it does fail, it fails bad and it looks like crap. But when it's good, you get some of the best horror movies out there. And the lost footage of Leah Sullivan is something I wish I saw sooner because I put off this movie for so long because I didn't know if I liked it, and I regretted every single month I spent not watching it because it's so good. We have the main character Leah, who is making a documentary for school about a murder case in the town. But when she keeps visiting the house, things start to get a little weird. Now, I can't give away too much about this movie without spoiling it completely, but the way it paces the film and sets up the tension is just chef's kiss. Chef's kiss. The reason why the movie is so well done and the tension is so effectively built is the characters. Leah and the cop she starts to date in the film's acting performances are some of the best I've seen in a horror movie. And the reason why, when you look at the two of them on camera, you can really tell that they care about each other and love each other. And that just brings out so much more heart and soul from the film because the characters are so much more believable. And the reason why they are so comfortable with each other and so believable is because they're actually dating in real life. I think they might be married now. Someone can fact check that for me. But we're getting such a good acting performance because all of these emotions that we are seeing from these two are real, because in real life they also exist. Obviously, this isn't possible all the time in horror movies, but for this one, it aided in the performance perfectly. Even the performances from the side characters are incredibly natural. The documentary she puts together from interviewing all these people feels very realistic. I don't know if you've ever tried to interview your mom or dad before on a camera, but usually people freeze up and start acting different once they're in front of the camera, but not with the characters in this film. This is one of the few found footage horror films that effectively uses found footage as a video format, because in the film, there are moments where we can see the bad thing that's about to happen before the characters can actually see it. Because they're recording, we can only see the reflection of things or whatnot, so they can't actually see what's in frame. And this leads to some very, very scary moments of tension where you're sitting back in your chair and you're like, run, get out of there. What are you doing? He's right behind you. But it's not done in a way that's overly cheap. It's done in a perfect way. And I don't even think this movie has any jump scares, really. The dread that it builds is just so lasting. And once the movie's over, you just think to yourself, damn, I hope my doors are locked tonight. And speaking of locking your doors, this movie will make you want to lock your entire house. And it's butterfly kisses.
Crane, and then it got a little upsetting after that.
This is yet again another found footage horror movie, but this one is unlike anything I think I've ever seen, because it combines 3 different found footage narratives into one movie. The film has 3 different storylines. The original storyline about the students trying to film Peeping Tom, Gavin, the documentary host who tries to verify and complete the students' film, and then the documentary crew's perspective of them following around Gavin. This creates such a complex meta narrative that even comments on found footage films themselves. And this allows for such a complex story, which is why I think this film is so genuinely unsettling. And I only think this film could be done correctly with found footage. I think if it's done any other way, it takes you out of it completely, because the story being told about Peeping Tom is very believable.
Possibility that this whole thing is real, and we have the possibility that this whole thing is a largely plausible hoax.
It blurs the line from fiction and reality. The film goes to great lengths to make us question if what we're seeing is even true or even real, because we have an unreliable narrator. I'm not going to reveal this as a spoiler, but even the credits make you question if this is real or not. Part of what makes you believe that it's real is that the mythology behind Peeping Tom is so well built out. It sounds like it's an urban legend that's been around in a small town for 100 years, when no, the film creator just made it up. And because the mythology behind Peeping Tom is so deep, it makes it so much more rewarding that this slow burn horror film pays off at the end. It rewards us for sticking around and being curious of where this story is going to go. And the format this story is told through aids into creating this sense of suspense and dread. We're working with some really old footage and cameras here, so when things go wrong on camera, it could be easily explained away as just an old camera having a glitch or having a bug. But it breadcrumbs us just enough that in the back of our minds, we're always thinking, is this a glitch or is this real? Did they actually see Peeping Tom? And while this doesn't have a ton of jump scares in it, and the final image of this movie is genuinely so unsettling, because it makes you feel that if your eyelashes are itchy or tickling, you won't want to open them. I can't explain why, but you're just going to have to trust me and watch the movie for yourself to find out. But really, these are all just my opinion on what are some of the scariest horror movies out there. I would love to hear your opinion on what you think the scariest horror movie you've seen is down in the comments below. Make sure to like this video and subscribe, and turn on the bell because my next video is going to be diving deep into found footage horror movies.